I've got something I want to play for you.
John Berger, 1926 to 2017. Writer, broadcaster, storyteller. In 1972, his groundbreaking BBC series Ways of Seeing, Berger encouraged the nation to question the way images are reproduced and interpreted. Not content with the intellectual hubbub of Paris and London, Berger spent much of his life in the French countryside working alongside peasants, whose lives were the inspiration for many of his books and plays. When his novel G won the Booker Prize, Berger made a point of donating half the money to the British Black Panthers, highlighting the colonial exploits of the Booker Prize's founders. John Berger's fascination with dignity and beauty, his love of storytelling, his radical compassion towards the world, and his political integrity have been an inspiration for artists ever since. The Seasons in Quincy, 4 portraits of John Berger, finds the man in the final years of his life, entertaining guests over the course of a year. In winter, he makes apple crumble and discusses the traumas of war with the actor Tilda Swinton. Spring focuses on the inner lives of farmyard animals. Summer brings an ambitious panel discussion about narrative and world politics. And in autumn, Swinton's teenage children visit and pick raspberries for John. You're listening to MoobTube, where every week we discuss a film currently on Mubi because it's never been done before. Owen, in these times of tearing down statues, how did you find the reverent reverie of this modern monument?
It was dog shit, Ralph. Pure dog shit. That was a really, really all-encompassing and very fulsome and very fair introduction to this film. I'm going to wear my cards on my sleeve in the palm of my hand.
Best place for him.
Yeah. This, I felt like when you say reverie, this is fundamentally a quite morbid, saccharine, soupy hagiography of a man who it almost feels like is inconveniencing the filmmakers by being in it, which worried me, because I think the problem is with this is not a documentary, and it makes that very clear in the title because it calls it Portrait. It's 4 portraits of John Berger, so it implies that this is a kind of impressionistic study to pick up the atmosphere of his life and his thinking, and to kind of assay and survey the aura of his life, as it were, and his impact on people around him. As a writer and artist and critic and thinker who spent his entire life collaborating, it would be very kind of, I suppose, unfair to him to kind of create a film that was just about him. I don't think he'd want that. But I think the problem there is the film makes too many presumptions about what John Berger wants, and it felt, watching it, like we were watching this kind of morbid post-mortem of a man who was still alive during the making of the film. And it just felt really pretentious, to be honest. So when I say dog shit, I mean, it had moments of levity, and there were some moments that were quite enjoyable, particularly the initial scene where, to an extent, where we see him kind of making apple crumble and chatting to Tilda Swinton in his kitchen. And I thought more of that, John Berger in his element chatting is more interesting to me than what the filmmakers did with the 4 quarters, the 4 seasons of this film. But maybe, did you have a favourite part? Was there a part of those that, was there one of those 4 pieces that you felt was particularly strong, or did you like all of it, or did you, like me, think it was, pure unfiltered dog shit?
I didn't like this film. I think probably my favourite part was, I guess, the first part, but actually I found almost the more sincere it became, the more staged and uncomfortable it felt. So that scene where Berger and Swinton discuss the trauma of war, there's something uncomfortable about the way that she reads his own poem to him, about the way that the way that they bond. I'm afraid this sounds very disrespectful, but it comes across as insincere, and the insincerity seems to be
suffocating in a way.
It seems to come off of Swinton much more than Berger. I mean, Berger comes through this with almost with his dignity intact. He's such a generous, kind person. He allows all these people to make this film about themselves in the most disgusting way possible.
It's very self-serving, because this really is like, a portrait of Tilda Swinton. It's a portrait of John Berger that's filtered through this lens that Tilda Swinton has applied to it. And obviously it's unfair, Tilda Swinton is not some rando BBC4 filmmaker who's just rocked up at John Berger's house. They've collaborated on films before. She's acted in short, sort of short films that he's appeared in and written, and she's been part of his creative life world. And they are, I'm not pretending to say that they're not friends or anything. I'm sure, they were quite close, but it feels like the hagiographic nature of this film, this sort of saint-like treatment with which she kind of treats John Berger, just comes across as, like you said, really insincere, like she's hanging on his every word, like he's, this is something to remember. He's probably had a million tableside chats, and I think what kind of pulls you out of this moment, which is potentially quite interesting, is her reading his poem to him and her talking in a very patronizing way, like he's sharp as a tack, right? But she's like, yes, John, yes, and it's all very like really patronizing, and it feels like we're like, it's closing time at the dementia ward, the way she's acting, not in terms of how he comes across, because he comes across really thoughtful, and his thinking is very clear and crystalline to me. And I think one of the things that frustrated me is that his entire career, John Berger, and ways of seeing and other things, was to be didactic and to kind of reduce quite complicated ideas. And this was a man who didn't go to university, at least in a conventional way. He studied painting. Who was trying to communicate quite complicated ideas in a demotic and straightforward way. Because Ways of Seeing was popular entertainment in a way. But
it was at a time when there were only 2 TV channels. He was on one of them and broadcasting to saying very interesting and radical things to a very broad audience, and that you don't see that anymore much now. People consume more radical content, but it tends to be things they already believe. And I think there's a kind of particular genre of sort of BBC4 documentaries, and they don't really attempt to reach over the aisle very much. The kind of, or like BBC content like Front Row or the South Bank Show and things like that kind of typified that. And maybe someone who is kind of similar is like Melvin Bragg in a way, or like at least the atmosphere of what Melvin Bragg is trying to do with like in our time, right? And the parallel I was thinking here was like the Francis Bacon interview that Melvin Bragg does as a kind of companion piece, because Francis Bacon was alive at the time, which makes it comparable to this, because this isn't like technically a post-mortem, because he was still alive. And that's an amazing portrait of Francis Bacon, because it's when I saw, so I know I'm diverting away from John Berger, but I think it's important, because when I had an image of Francis Bacon in my head from his artworks, and when the film about him enriched that understanding of him, because you realise he was great fun, and the film was centered on him, and Melvin Bragg was just like a background character who kind of an MC. And in this film it just seems a lot about Tilda Swinton and about the young filmmakers who travel up into Quincy to go and hang out, and it becomes really, really about them, about fucking Ben Lerner mouthing, I mean, there's Ben Lerner's presence in this film is execrable. I mean, there's this debate they have halfway through, which there doesn't seem to be any explanation of like why any of the people who are there. There's no sort of kind of formal introduction to any of the people, and then they kind of go on this rambling discussion that goes from like the politics of Narendra Modi to the Tea Party. I mean, obviously this was done in 2014, so they don't have the benefit of being able to talk about upsets like Trump and Brexit, which I'm sure once all that had happened, there was plenty of pontificating to do. But I mean, it's not John Berger's role to like predict elections. I mean,
he was a political writer and a political thinker, but not in the crass. This was almost a too crass way of thinking about how his politics manifests.
Well, yes, it
Or
just
his
didn't go anywhere.
Marxism
All it
manifests,
amounted to
yeah.
was just saying the word narrative and politics in the same sense, which, you know...
And go,
obviously
the right have a very strong, you know, sense of narrative, and then someone else says it in slightly different words. And then you said it. I know, you know, we try not to share our thoughts about a film, like, before we talk, but, you know, you made a good point. There's, like, this real awkward silence.
Oh, yeah. Well, John
is
Berger
that
says
about?
this thing. He says about purgatory. Oh, God, I'm going to have to find it.
It's in hell where solidarity is important, not in heaven. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good, yeah.
It's in hell where solidarity is important, not in heaven. John Berger says this, and then, like, this sort of smug, chubby media guy who's the director of this film sits in the middle with his fingers interlocked, and he sort of, like, he looks like he's listening to a Beethoven sonata, and then he sort of, like, he nods his head upwards and goes, ooh, ooh. And then, like, Berger looks at her expectantly, hoping to get a reaction.
Someone's going to pick it up, and carry...
And then he nods, he goes, oh, that's very good, as if he's having his penis sucked. And then John Berger kind of, like, looks sort of, like,
almost
glares
desperately
back
around.
at him, kind of like, oh yes, I said something clever. It shows Berger in not as good a light as most things do.
No,
but
there's
the
a
whole
moment where, because he puts at one point Berger puts his head in his hands. I think he's just physically, like, because he pointed a lot when he talked. He's very expressive with his hands when he talks, but it almost looks like this fucking, like, moment of despair when he's like, what the fuck? I mean, even stylistically, that part was shot in black and white.
Yeah, why?
As well. Why?
It wasn't even shot in black and white, it was shot in colour, and then they made it in black and white.
Yeah,
and then,
yeah,
like,
then
they
they made
did
it
a thing
black
at the
and
end
white,
where they
yeah.
turn it into colour. Because black and white is more... Oh my God, it's so many things about this film.
And then there's, like, Ben Lerner going, well, maybe, like, you know, it's like fucking bong hit, you know, and it's like, oh, well, maybe, like, capitalism is already over. And it's just, what the fuck does that mean? Like, practically, like, you're out of your depth, mate. You're fucking out of your depth. Why are you talking, like, you know, you've written a good book.
Which one's the good book?
Like, no, actually, no, he's written no good books. He's written, we agreed over this, right? Like, the first part of the Topeka School is great.
Yeah. That's some
It's
good
really
bits in
good.
Topeka School.
It bangs, it slaps. And, like,
Mainly
Tosha
the
Station is
first
kind of
bit.
good. But they're all
Yeah.
very, you know, pretentious.
I haven't read any other Ben Lerner, but he just comes across such an arse in this. And
Such an arse,
yeah, that thing he
such a
says,
bore,
capitalism,
yeah.
in some sense, capitalism's already over. And it's
So
like...
what does that mean? No, it's not.
No,
Like,
it's fucking not.
clearly not. It's
You
like
know.
it's like trying to do, like, Frederick Jameson, like, you know, but I'd rather listen to Frederick Jameson talk about, like, the nature of, like, late capitalism, the meaning of late capitalism and postmodernity. That's, like, an interesting conversation. This is
fucking
not.
Ben
This is
Lerner.
just Ben Lerner.
Capitalism's
going,
obviously not over.
Yeah.
Like,
And
look around you.
it's-
Like, it might be over for people who can fucking fly to Quincy and have a chat with their
Quincy.
hero.
For a weekend. I think there's that, and there's that bit felt smug and usurious, and I think the second part of the film was the worst. I think technically maybe, but I think at least was kind of sincere. It's when there was, like, a group of young filmmakers who have gone up to Quincy, but it kind of overlapped with a time when John Berger's wife had passed away. So they were like, obviously we're not going to, like, interrupt his mourning. So the film kind of
Then they end up just making some shit vegan propaganda.
Yeah, it was this really weird, like, eco film with, like, and then these little kind of weird nods to, like, Jean-Luc Godard, I think, when someone's like they're just staring at the camera in this, like, overly high contrast field, and one of them's reading some fucking meaningless drivel, and then they go to a zoo because John Berger wrote about animals. It's just really reductive and simplistic. It's like, you know, why was this film conceived in this way? Why can't we have, like, I know John Berger, whilst, yes, he was, like, a clear thinker, he was innovative in terms of his essays and his output. He was still kind of an experimenter of form. But they've kind of taken that. They've gone, oh, we don't want to make an obvious, direct documentary about John Berger. we're going to make something a bit more formally experimental. But I was like, I just don't think the creative vision was there.
But it's toothless, you know. And also, like Tilda Swinton, the films that the parts 1 and 4 that contain her and her family, they're produced by the Derek Jarman Film Lab.
Yeah, the Derek Jarman Lab in London.
Which,
Burbank,
like,
I think, isn't it?
Which, I mean, I don't know anything about that, but like, it's just so painful to see this kind of invocation of Jarman,
two great masterful
and an
people.
Invocation of Berger, and it's like she's not without her talents, Tilda Swinton, but like,
no.
you know, like the way that she presents her relationship to John Berger here, and I would argue the way in which Jarman is sort of invoked in relationship to her. It's just like
it's almost exploitative.
Get out. Yeah, like, this is not.
Step away.
You know, like Berger's, Berger's writing is very meaningful to me, and he said many, and what he says is actually like, when he's good, he's discomforting. Yeah, I'm very middle class. I'm in London. I haven't really been outside the West at all, and the way that Berger writes about the global order and inequality and the violence of capitalism, you know, it implicates one, and it threatens one with the violence of how things are right now, and it makes you it doesn't reassure you. And I think that something's happened, especially in this current internet age where information is so accessible. There's something that happens for people, quite sort of privileged people on the left, and I sort of noticed it in myself, where, you know, at the times that we feel most impotent politically, creatively, whatever, we turn towards maybe a YouTube clip of John Berger or James Baldwin for inspiration, because these were people who were totally indefatigable in their sort of integrity,
their surety as well, because they were breaking
absolutely.
fresh ground when they were, and we're walking over the remnants of that very trodden ground.
Exactly, but it's like you have to you can't just watch clips of these people. You can't just go to their houses and hang out with them. Like, you have to be them. You know, you have to walk the walk, and this film is like a film about how not to walk the walk, how to just sort of, and that little clip of him saying this statement about purgatory, and this middle class man in the middle just sort of going, "Ooh, that's very good."
Ooh, yes,
you know, it's just
like
sickening.
You know, it's like it is sickening. It's odious. I think, like, to see this through a particular lens, I was thinking about, you know, portrait again is an interesting word to call this. Obviously, Berger spent a lot of his life anatomizing and thinking through portraits, like particularly like portraits of the golden age, and, you know, 1500s to, like, you know, 1700s and 1800s, and how wealth was, you know, how we saw ourselves as a globalized or globalizing West in portraiture, right? And in ways of seeing, there's a really interesting bit where he says, he's talking about these kind of like Gainsborough portraits and Joshua Reynolds portraits and Holbein portraits, you know, that famous Mr. and Mrs. Andrews painting, as expressions of enormous wealth. And it was quite radical in a way at the time, what he was saying, because he wasn't academicizing what his criticism of these paintings. He was saying, yes, there were really good artists at this time, Rembrandt, for example, who he really likes, but often the tradition of oil painting became an object of wealth, and we think of it all as being worthy and good. He was like, actually, this wasn't really art, as it were, at all. It was a way of framing ourselves and framing our worldview and our wealth. And there's a really interesting bit where he's talking about these paintings and the mindset of people who had these paintings commissioned. And he says, you know, these portraits say, I once existed and looked like this. These portraits say, I was an object of respect and envy. And there's almost this sense, like, by creating this portrait, fucking Swinton and her collaborators are doing exactly the same fucking thing. Berger even says in this documentary, he says, especially scenes where, you know, aristocrats had put themselves in mythological scenes surrounded by nymphs and naiads and dryads. They said they were almost wearing the bodies of these myths to kind of to anchor their own wealth and power and importance. And it's like, it's exactly what Swinton is doing. She's almost climbing inside John Berger's world and life, and kind of possessing him and using him as a fucking signifier of her own artistic worldview and importance. And it felt quite vicious in a way. And I'm not saying that she did this in the militia. I think she genuinely thinks this was a sincere portrait, but I just think John Berger was just a man.
That was his whole thing, that he was just a man.
Yeah, just a man. And this is like unfortunate man. So this hagiographic style is itself like really just irritating.
But the medium is the message, right? I mean, like, without wishing to be too contemporary, like, we are talking about like statues and stuff at the moment, and like, and we're being forced to investigate the circumstances under which, various sort of colonial exploiters were monumentalized or celebrated in these monuments, and there is a sort of liberal argument in between this. Why don't we just pull them down and replace them with people we like? And like, actually, like, it's a lot more like, if you're a fascist, like, a statue is quite on brand, but if you're like, if your ethos is about like everyone being equally deserving of respect, if your ethos is about a collective project of liberation, then a statue isn't really appropriate. And it's kind of, it's a bit of a master's tools thing. Masters always masters. And I feel like what's happened here is there's a sort of very individualistic, liberal, bourgeois approach to someone who whose ethos is basically quite modest and quite collective, but because of the latter, because of his kindness and his generosity and his openness, he does not have the arrogance that you and I have to understand that this project is a completely conceited failure and shouldn't go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's clear that it is conceited and failed. I mean, I was expecting to see more round condemnation of that, but maybe it proves the point that this was pretty well received, like through slightly gritted teeth in the reviews I've read.
What did people say?
Just kind of like no one's come out and said this was phenomenal. It's kind of, solid 3-star, maybe 4-star territory, as it were, with people kind of going, oh yes, it's very honourable and treats his legacy well and blah blah. And I think again, people are uncomfortable with reaching out. You're saying they're idolising the man, hanging on his words, over engaging critically with his thought and what he was trying to shake people up and encourage people to do, with things like ways of seeing, and in his plays, and with him going to the countryside in 70s in France was a way of like actually really understanding. He took these things seriously. He didn't sit there on a panel and have a talk about what it meant to be a French peasant. He went and lived in France and made it his life, and in a very sincere, direct and clear way, and tried to create art and thinking out of that. And this film's very much like, look at this great, lovely, wonderful man. Look at the wonderful, great things he did. He's so smart and so clever, and that's it. And it almost, like I said, it feels like it does feel like a statue in a way, because it feels like a gravestone. And actually, that's not what he was advocating and pushing for. Like, giving money to the Black Panthers was a very, direct and obvious thing for him, because he was trying to dismantle like the tools and the logic of things like art. And this film, by being incredibly pretentious and pointless and meandering and emptily avant-garde in places, kind of just undoes the whole project of what he was working towards. And this is someone who, like, I haven't engaged with loads of John Berger, to be honest, in a bigger sense, because I think partly weirdly because I come from an anthropology background, an anthropology of buildings background and stuff like that, and John Berger doesn't really feature in that world. You have there's other luminaries and other thinkers, but yeah, it just feels very insincere, and there's a lot of dissonance between what he was, and it's very obvious. The dissonance seems obvious to me, and from us talking, that the worldview, the agitation he was trying to create, is opposite to what this film is doing.
Yes, it's a complacent film.
Yeah, and also
and
just
then, and then there were, yeah.
Yeah, no, go on. Sorry, I've been rattling on.
No, just the relationship to injustice is one of sort of liberal concern rather than like solidarity.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
But it's, you know what, it's very hard to exist in solidarity in these times.
Oh, for sure. It's a very atomized, blasted hellscape of a world we live in, as people like to say. You know, maybe
I don't like to say that, but I suppose there's some resonance. Yeah,
yeah, but almost like the fatalism of Twitter. You know, it's kind of like, why do I log onto this hell site every day?
Well, don't would be my advice. I have been off Twitter for like. Well, I did log in
quite a while.
The other day. I logged in briefly, and the first tweet was someone predicting that the election would be
the American election,
the American election. Please play this back to me if it does come to pass. But it was a very morbid leftist prediction that the election in America would be technically won by Biden, but Trump would claim the election was falsified and trigger a civil war. And this was like a very sincere, like art adjacent lefty person being like, I think this will happen. You know what? Everything's so terrible right now, and it's like, oh my god! Like,
I think it's
why think about it if it hasn't happened yet? Like, why even?
Yeah, I think people like I've seen that view as well parroted around that like there will be a crisis of authority and legitimacy in America because not enough people will turn out to vote, and Trump will dispute it and form a civil war. And I think that's kind of like. It's a very disarming thing to kind of automatically assume you're going to lose all the time. And quite weird.
Yeah, I mean the much more likely thing to happen
defeatist.
Is that Trump will win and then all the Democrats will claim it was false.
Much more likely.
That's what they did last time.
Much more likely. I mean,
they'll start a whole another fucking investigation into
the resistance
instead of trying to figure out why they're so shit at getting people to vote for them.
Oh, exactly. I mean, that was exactly what happened. I know we're kind of swaying into like American politics, or whatever, but
we're now just we've found our destiny as the white male English Red Scare.
But it's true because they found like they hit their stride with the Russian collusion debate and with the fucking facile resistance, and I feel like this is like the South Bank resistance #resistance, right? That have made this film almost, and it that's what irks me about it. And I think there were it's like they just they failed because it just had this lack of vision. And in the section at the end, which was sort of when Tilda Swinton brings her spooky children to Quincy, and they sort of hang out with John Berger, and it's just all very weird and kind of facile, and they continue to treat him like some doddery old man, even though he's got huge big dick energy, as they say, because he's like, I'm fucking gonna ride a bike and he's kind of going to teach you to ride a motorbike, and he's by far the most interesting person there, and they just bring him eggs, and he kind of
it's just so disrespectful, and they're like, these are the best eggs, these are the best eggs in the world. I'm like,
no, he lives on a fucking farm, mate.
He lives on a farm, mate. I shop at Gales, and they've started stocking these new eggs. I won't give the name, but they're this independent egg manufacturer.
We'll put the
link in the description. We should get sponsored. There's this particular company, this particular farm that provide eggs for Gales at the moment. They're fucking amazing eggs. I can't believe Tilda Swinton's kids are popping out better eggs than that. Can I read you a bit of John Berger?
Can we? Yeah. Let's bring some light.
I picked up "Hold Everything Dear" by John Berger, which is published by Verso, great publisher. And the first page I opened it on, it was like an essay called 10 Dispatches About Place, and the 10th and final dispatch just said, "Yes, I'm still, amongst other things, a Marxist." So that, firstly, was totally missing from that film. A declaration of
the class politics was not
intention.
Present here at all. Yeah,
but on a deeper level, from a master of pitilessness, Berger writes, and this is in 2004, so before everyone was all political. The present period of history is one of the wall, When the Berlin one fell, the prepared plans to build walls everywhere were unrolled. Concrete, bureaucratic, surveillance, security, racist walls. Everywhere, the walls separate the desperate poor from those who hope against hope to stay relatively rich. The walls cross every sphere, from crop cultivation to healthcare. They exist too in the richest metropolises of the world. The wall is the front line of what long ago was called the class war. On the one side, every armament conceivable, the dream of no body bag wars, the media, plenty, hygiene, many passwords to glamour. On the other side, stones, short supplies, feuds, the violence of revenge, rampant illness, an acceptance of death, and an ongoing preoccupation with surviving one more night, or perhaps one more week together. The choice of meaning in the world today is here between the two sides of the wall. The wall is also inside each one of us. Whatever our circumstances, we can choose within ourselves which side of the wall we are attuned to. It is not a wall between good and evil. Both exist on both sides. The choice is between self-respect and self-chaos.
This is good. I underlined a couple of bits when I was reading earlier, to be honest, as well. And it's like the theme kind of appropriate to this. And one bit that stuck out when I was thinking about this film, and he says, to remain innocent may also be to remain ignorant. And it felt like this film is cloaked in an enormous innocence, in a way, at least in sections. It's kind of defanged hagiographic life of a saint strategy that it takes, and it kind of makes Berger seem like this holy fool. And I know we talked about holy fools before, actually. It kind of has some parallels of Structure of Crystal, but he was no holy fool. And this film does feel stripped of those class politics. It is stripped of his Marxism. It's stripped of his, apart from having a brief conversation about Modi, Indra Modi, it's sort of stripped of any.
That was so tokenistic, wasn't it? Not that I know anything. Not that I know anything about Indian politics, but like they just bring in this Indian woman and get her to moan about Modi for 4 minutes, and then that's it.
And it feels like that's the nod to globalization and to colonialism and to the enormous wealth that was poured into the West, into its art and thinking from colonialism. That was another irk, and I think, and it's not like there's a perfect way to make a documentary or film or portrait of a thinker. It's quite difficult. You might think, sometimes we choose documentaries and they problematize somebody. There's the really great Miles Davis documentary.
I haven't seen it.
It's really good. I think it's on BBC iPlayer, actually, maybe, but it's good. It's what a kind of, as they say, warts and all portrait of Miles Davis. It's interesting. And then you've got the kind of these kind of films like the James Baldwin films, I'm Not Your Negro, for example, which kind of inhabit their thinking and life world, which is all the, there's the Joan Didion, the Sentiment Hold documentary, which kind of occupy that middle ground where they occupy the headspace and the thinking space of that person. I don't know, and it kind of wasn't confident enough to be any one of those things.
The safe route is just to feature lots of the subject, and this is what this film didn't really do. I went to an amazing event at the National Gallery where they showed some really rare footage from the BBC of like monitor documentaries he'd done, and this head-to-head interview he'd done earlier in his career, and there's so much, like even with that, even if he wasn't there to speak to you at that time, as was the case with the second film, like there's so much of him you can bring out. Yeah, and it's even just shocking that they didn't.
To have access to his, they're in his house, and to have access to his artwork as well. It's a form. Yeah, he abandoned, as it were, painting in the sort of 40s, 50s, because there's a good interview with him at
painting's done, isn't it?
Painting's done. He's like, he said with the imminence of like nuclear war hanging over your head, he said it felt more, rather than to work slowly on painting, it seemed essential and necessary to write often and to write quickly and to write forcefully. And so you've got access to his work because he started painting again, and you've got access to his sketches and his drawings. And one thing, there are nice elements of this that he's continually sketching and doodling in this, which is interesting. And there's so many different ways you could look at. You could take, if you want to tell a softer, atmospheric portrait of him. There's ways of doing that. I just think it didn't fulfill on that. It kind of his very first novel, right, Painter of Our Time, which was sort of banned-ish. It was like pulled out of publication after a month or so being in print, and then Penguin picked it up again, so 10 years later, or whatever, published it again. And it was about a painter who's gone missing, and the story of him is told through these documents that somebody kind of picks up. It's this Hungarian, like, exiled painter. And so there's like a way formally, like, or maybe they could have like, used that format of his absence to tell an interesting story about him, but it doesn't, because he's kind of there and he's not there, and he's floating around, and he's not really given much space to kind of talk in a structured way. So the stuff he does talk about, it's not him at his best, maybe, like when he's talking about his father. It's quite moving, but yeah, but I mean, even, I don't want to belittle it, but like everyone from that generation has like a poignant story about their parents being traumatized by the war, and it's kind of not really, it's not given it doesn't have the detail and the expressive of so many of the stories he's told. Like it's not given, it's just so like sort of throwaway and casual the way it is there, and it just so much of such importance is thrown against so much of such little importance in this film. That's what
it occurred to me just while you were speaking how I would do this film if I was given.
Go on. Ralph will fix it. The new irregular feature section of this program.
Yeah, the irregular feature where Ralph makes the film instead, and it is better.
It is good. Gone.
It is good. Yeah, so I would have introduced John Berger to some up-and-coming drill rappers. I would have shown him their work. I would have gotten them into a room together to chat about things. I would have got John Berger to interview the drill rappers, and then I would have got John Berger to take the drill rappers around the farm without their phones.
Were you promoting your own work there because of your music videos?
But yes, sometimes I do film music videos for drill rappers.
But no, I think, in a way that's better because it gives a context and it brings in a didactic element.
The dialectics, and also like that's what's happening now. And what's amazing about Berger is that he didn't become a fogey. Like he stayed in tune with what was going on. There's an interview with him just before he died where he responds to the US election result in 2016. There's like, he was tuned in, and that's a very valuable thing. The tragedy of old age. I probably sound like such a cunt, but anyway, the tragedy of old age is that a lot of people, they don't become wise. They've got many years in which to accumulate wisdom, and for whatever reason they don't. Many people do, but I mean, Berger really was wise, and he took the many years of life he had and he reflected upon them in the most extraordinary way. And that's something where when you spend a period of time with someone of that age, you really don't know what you're going to learn because that person's lived.
Because he didn't ossify, he didn't harden. And I think the problem with the film is that I think they allow, Tilda Swinton, for example, kind of carries him away from that vitality and presence and the necessity of his thinking. And I think you're right, maybe. And it is just like, in a sense, they kind of do that, at the end when they introduce Tilda Swinton's kids to John Berger, but they've got, they're just nervous upper-class posh kids. They haven't got anything, they're not open to his...
Tilda Swinton's daughter is literally her character in that Joanna Hogg film.
Joanna Hogg film, yeah. But it's true, and it's like there's no, where's the kind of clash of ideas and backgrounds? It doesn't feel useful to bring these kids there. It felt like it just felt very they were available, and that just shows a lack of
Imagination.
Ambition maybe, but whatever.
The time is coming for the Swintons. The Swintons are going to
cancelled.
They're going to. Yeah, I think Tilda Swinton's probably going to get cancelled. She's probably going to. Luckily, she doesn't have Twitter, but she'll probably end up saying something that will get misinterpreted, and then she'll get sent for by the left.
Do you think?
Then,
I think the day is coming.
Everyone will be relieved they don't have to watch Derek Jarman films anymore.
I for one. Although, no,
I've never really been that into Derek Jarman's work.
I've struggled.
I understand.
Caravaggio is kind of fun. Caravaggio is very fun, and it's a very good entry point for Derek Jarman in a way, because it's a kind of well-known topic, and it's not radically kind of unsettling like some of his later work is, and it's not as immediately politically incisive as his later work.
Someone told me Sebastian's good.
I haven't seen Sebastian actually. Maybe we could do if Mubi. I've never seen Mubi do any Jarman actually, but it's a shorter form filmmaker for the most part.
Speaking of which, we're coming up to the 3/4. Yeah, any parting remarks?
Watch John Berger. It's just good. If anything, this film.
Dude, is there a motorbike outside?
It's actually John Berger. Well, it's
the ghost
coming
of
back from the dead.
That's another thing about this film. He teaches Honor Swinton to ride a motorbike. It's kind of cute. That's kind of nice.
It's kind of cute. It's alright.
But my cuteness capacity was worn out by that point.
Totally worn out by that. Well, after they tried to fucking bring him an egg.
Fuck your egg.
Fuck your egg. No, my parting thought is, just go and watch John Berger. Because I haven't watched, like, for example, Ways of Seeing for so long, and I kind of forgotten it. And so I watched some Ways of Seeing and watched some interview clips after I saw this in a fit of rage. And it was really cozy, it was nice and it was interesting and it was insightful, and he just has an exceptional way of framing ideas that can seem quite nebulous or difficult to refine, and he just has an excellent way of refining these ideas. Somebody called it, like, I was looking at a YouTube comments and someone's like, this is like Marxist ASMR, which I kind of love.
On that note, this is MoobTube, your weekly supply of Marxist ASMR. And next week we will review another film. What will we review? Mulholland Drive is on there actually, which I haven't seen for a while.
Haven't you? Okay.
I mean, that would be a lot of people have seen that, so that's quite a good.
I think we haven't done a film that people have actually watched for a while.
Yeah, our favourite film was Structure of Crystal, which no one's seen.
There's some Almodovar, but I have, again, Almodovar is someone I just really struggle to enjoy, sadly.
Homophobe.
Yes. No, I just I have generally struggled. I think the one film I kind of want to hate watch, let us know in the comments, is Redoubtable, the
film about Godard starring Louis Garrel.
Godard, which looks fucking awful.
We've already watched an awful film. We have to
film.
watch a good film. Let's watch Mulholland Drive because I haven't seen it since I was a teenager.
Nah, let it be so. It's good. Mulholland Drive is great, actually.
All right.
I've already given my cards away, but yeah.
You might have a new take on it.
Second wave.
Since COVID, you might think actually there's some.
I've refined all my opinions since COVID.
All right. Thank you, listeners.
Negative energy. Yeah. Bye then.
Bye. Lots of love.